So this is the first time in my entire life that I switched from Firefox to Chrome because it usually works better, and it did not.
Oh,
Even though I had to do that the first time when we tested everything. So anyway, here we are.
yes. We try to take all the risk out of everything, and yet you never know. But it's live. This is a live conference. It always happens. But thank you for joining us, Hazel. We're going to give you the stage now, and I'm so excited about this talk.
I'm looking forward to it. So the first thing about this talk is that I'm going to actually look forward to having a little bit of audience participation in here. And also, I did have a demo I was originally planning to do, but it turns out that the demo broke in every possible way. And so we don't have a demo, but we do have the outline of the demo. So I can show you what it was going to be and how cool it was going to be. But I decided to take the opportunity and get a little more space to talk about what feature flags are and why they're useful and present my favorite way to think about them in a way that gets more people involved than just engineering. So you might be asking yourself, what are feature flags? OpenFeature.dev says that feature flags are a software development technique that allows teams to enable, disable, change the behavior of certain features, and so on without modifying the source code, which sounds awesome. But I want to actually dig into that and pull it down into its essence so that we can figure out what the full implications of that really are. So feature flags allow you to change the behavior of something without modifying the source code. Cool. What does that really mean? So when I hear without modifying the source code, what I really hear is I hear the word runtime. And I really, really like the idea of at runtime because runtime, it turns out, is a very human notion of the runtime in the whole development lifecycle of a company. Runtime for people is that tiny little slice of stuff that you are currently poking. And so for product people, that is the product. For the front end people, that tends to be the web. For the back end people, that tends to be the back end. For the infrastructure people, the runtime is actually your infrastructure. The runtime is often your CI/CD pipeline, or often your delivery. It's often your Terraform. Runtime for you is what you're looking at, what you're poking. But it also means that executives have a runtime. And it means that product owners have a runtime. And it means that security people have a runtime, and they're all different. And so feature flags allow teams to change the behavior at runtime. Means that we can start pulling this beyond just engineering, which is the exciting part. So we take this concept of teams, like multiple teams, then what that really implies to me is we have a bit of a jump here, but we have this. In a distributed system, you have this runtime, you have the optionality, and you have teams coordinating. And so the optionality is really important, the coordination is important, and the runtime is important. And those are kind of the three fundamental aspects of feature flags. So when you think of optionality for many people when they're, for many software engineers when they're designing a system, it is the thing that gets pointed at later and you say, this was good architecture, or this was good design. Optionality is when you commit to a decision, but you don't necessarily commit to having a very painful undoing of that decision. And so, as a company, you really want to have optionality at runtime for everybody across all the things that they do in a way that they can coordinate it. And that sounds like feature flags. But it turns out infrastructure people don't actually really have feature flags. So honestly, unit testing, incremental reloading, or basically anything that everybody else in development has had for the last 30 years. Every single time I try to explain the state of the DevOps or the state of SRE or the state of infrastructure development to even mobile embedded engineers, they just look at me with horror. And they're like, how do you survive in this system? And when you talk to business analysts, they are used to being able to just jump into things. When you talk to executives, they're used to jumping into things. And infrastructure is one of these very weird things where we, okay, do we have future flights? Can we build them? How would you? And so we have this future flight thing. Okay, infrastructure doesn't have it. Do you need it? I think you do. So the reason I think we need it is because if we want that optionality and we want that coordination across the teams, if you're thinking of what is the part of the company's technology stack that enables the most coordination between systems, it's often the glue code. It's often, in many cases, what we consider the infrastructure. And so, of everything in development, ironically, it feels like feature flights are actually most suited for development and most suited for infrastructure. And it seems kind of silly that we're the ones that don't have it. And so often, to drive the point home a bit more about how feature flights are useful, you can use them to coordinate and separate release and deploy, which is super useful, and that's the canonical example. We can often use them to change out the software runtime. You can use them to enable features. You can take the best features of each platform. You can do a lot with them. So I had a proof of concept here, but I ran out of time. So I'm going to sketch out how the proof of concept, tying everything together with ArgoCD, was going to work and show you how that kind of would have happened. And then I'm going to open the floor for you, and I'm going to ask you to come up with the most creative use of a feature flag you could think of. But then I'll show you some of my ideas. Ready? So for the feature flag, the idea is you have something like ArgoCD for continuous deployment. It's really, you have this controller reconciliation model that can take a deployment plan and then take that plan and augment it with a plugin or an API server, and it will automatically watch for changes, which is everything you need in order to have a side channel of asynchronous updates influencing your infrastructure. If you use Open Feature, then you have a central store of features, a central API to access them from different parts of the tech stack, and you can start to integrate and tie together all these different things. And then events are where you take this idea and you flip things here and there and you start to push that out into so many different areas of the company. And it becomes truly multifunctional. So that's the goal. That's the idea. That's what the demo is going to have. The demo is going to have this front end, this back end thing, this infrastructure stuff, and changing the flag was at runtime going to trigger a redeployment to ArgoCD, and that was going to actually change the architecture of the application, which I almost had it working. But it's going to be super awesome when I actually do, and I can show you all. However, I know it works because I have proven in my head, theoretically, that it'll work. So now I'm going to open this up to you, the audience, my dear audience. If feature flights are coordination, runtime optionality, and this idea of distributed, what is the most creative use of a feature flag you can think of? Any ideas? No? Okay, well, I'll share with you some of mine. So I had some ideas of maybe we can test a new database driver and an ORM and a new database, and you can swap between the two without downtime. I'm going to show you my ideas, but I'm going to, yeah. So database migrations, you can have both tables at the same time. You can do this with the database. You can even go further and change the entire code path and change the query structures. You can change the external interpreter for a DSL. Love it. Beta testing features. Absolutely. What if you change the architecture of an application and the code base at the same time? If you wanted to go from AMD to ARM and add an API gateway or a sidecar setup, and you wanted to change how that works in certain code paths? Absolutely. Ooh, I really liked Josh's idea of geopolitical compliance pathing. But in fact, that's in one of these slides. Does your company have this idea that everything is hard-coded with IP addresses? You can swap that out with DNS-based routing, but only when you're ready. Does your code base assume that reads are fast and writes really happen? Did that stop being true? Refactor your access pattern to that kind and test that on canary audiences and see if changing your actual data model might work better. Do you need to change your code path in your compiler due to a new compiler version, but you need to support multiple versions still? Since you can feature flag the infrastructure, you can actually if-def out the code base without factoring it, or conditionally load out certain code paths, or add this dynamic behavior to choose what you need to if certain actual libraries to stop existing. Or this one's fun. What if your code paths were more multi-cloud compatible? Because you don't actually worry about using the lowest common denominator of everything. And I've heard some GDPR variants and geopolitical stuff in here. This is one of my favorite examples. What if you had a healthcare endpoint that returned only the information legally allowed to be shared in that local jurisdiction? What if you used feature flags to create an automatic circuit breaker for all of your releases? So that when the flag is tripped due to your SLOs or due to alerts or due to something else, you can automatically roll back the feature flag, not destroy the application, but just block off all the traffic to it so that you can examine it later and figure out what's going on. And then all of these external things can start happening as well. And so Joe had the idea and comment of what if I change the behavior of a service on the fly? What I consider as feature flagging? Absolutely. You can take feature flags and you can think of them really as if it's distributed, if it's about that runtime concept and it's about coordination, it's a feature flag. Anything can be a feature flag. And I really particularly like, yeah, you can have these vulnerabilities, discover remediation. You can make sure deployments only happen in authorized environments. So that means that if you look at Spiffy, Aspire, or workload attestation, dependency injection, runtime user metrics, they all kind of look the same when you look at it from this lens. So feature flags, where would they be maintained? So I typically like to say it depends, because it does. A very common use case would be to use something like the open feature operator and plug in backends into that. So let's say you have S3 as a feature flag store, you can do that. If you want to use LaunchDarkly, or if you want to use some other vendor, you can totally do that. If you want to use a local store or like a FlagD or some other object, I've even seen people use literal text files on the server as a feature flag store. But yeah, those are feature flags. Any last questions? Otherwise, I think my time is about done.
Thank you so much, Hazel. That was great.